Welcome to Currently, a weekly news roundup featuring conversations about some of the top local stories from the past 7 days from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Christal Frost. Now, this podcast was recorded at 5 p.m. on Thursday, April 3rd, so things may change by the time you're watching or listening. And Currently is made possible by underwriting from our generous lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. They're located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. Home fashion, elevated. Support also comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you are not just choosing a bank. You're choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community. You can visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. And from the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City, it's a chill hangout boasting a full bar of 200-plus rotating cans, drafts, shooters, and, of course, pinball machines, all in a low-key setting. Now, joining me in the studio today, as always, head writer of the Traverse City Ticker, Ms. Beth Milligan.
Hello.
Hello. And a first-time guest journalist in the Currently studio, science, conservation, and environment reporter, Ellie Katz is here.
Hi.
Hi.
Very excited to be here.
Can't believe it. Holy cats. That's what I say. I love it.
I love it too.
So exciting. Thank you so much for being with us today. You have been in Northern Michigan since 2023?
That's right. Yeah, summer 2023.
And you were born in Texas.
Yes.
Made your way to Grand Rapids?
Yeah, that's
Then
right.
Ann Arbor?
Then Ann Arbor, then Metro Detroit, and then here.
Well.
Wow,
We're lucky to have you.
The Michigan trifecta.
Yeah. It is like a triangle,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. And as a reminder, everyone, the Ticker is a free multimedia daily news email and website. And you can be sure to subscribe at traverseticker.com. If you subscribe, you don't have to look for it.
It's true. It just comes to your inbox every morning, and it is free, 100%
It's free. I mean, and it's really free. You're not like stealing information, are you?
No. No, we're not.
You're not. I love it. Also, Interlochen Public Radio, Interlochen Public Radio, I should say, is a listener-supported radio station that can be heard from Ludington to Mackinac City and pretty much everywhere online.
Yeah, you can stream it anywhere. We have streamers in a bunch of different states, in a bunch of different countries.
So great.
Yeah, we're in our fund drive right now, and we always hear from people. There's a couple in Germany and a couple in London who always write in, and it's just cool to hear that people are listening to news about Northern Michigan from the other side of the world.
Oh, gosh, that is cool.
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
on road trips. Like once a 91.5 signal dies out on the car, then we just flip over to the app and keep streaming it.
Oh,
It's
I
great.
love
Yeah.
that. Nice.
Just keep streaming.
Yeah, it's great.
I love it. Yeah, and there is a fund drive going on right now.
There is.
Yes. How can people give?
You can give at interlochenpublicradio.org. There's a big red donate button in the top right corner. You cannot miss it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
I've been there already. It's
Thank
fantastic.
you. Important time to be donating to public radio.
Yes.
Too, so it's great.
Thank you so much. So we're going to dive right in here, and we're going to start things off with you, Beth. Now, you covered 2 stories this week, and I know that wasn't the premise to think about summer in the stories, but it really has me thinking about warmer weather because of these stories. Even though it snowed yesterday, I mean, literally. Tell us about the camping conversation that's happening in East Bay Township right now.
Sure. I mean, both of these stories were really interesting to me as a writer because I think they deal with similar issues, which is property rights.
Yeah.
One more on the private property side and one on the public side. And I just thought they raised some interesting conversations. So the one in East Bay Township, at the time that we're recording this evening, Thursday evening, Township Planning Commissioners will be meeting this evening to discuss this. So by tomorrow when the show comes out, they'll have had this conversation. But they're not expected to make any decisions tonight. So it should be an ongoing conversation. But they are looking at, as part of last year, they were updating their zoning code. They were looking at a part of the zoning code that deals with temporary dwellings. And when we say temporary dwellings, we mean things like tents, trailers, motorhomes, RVs, campers, that kind of thing.
Things that can be moved fast.
Things that can be moved quickly.
Okay.
What I thought was interesting about this story, I cover zoning a lot. I hadn't really thought about this issue, but most of our local cities and townships have rules that regulate how you can have campers or RVs or tents in your yard. So many of us probably have memories growing up of, pitching a tent in our backyard,
Right.
to do your backyard camping and having the s'mores and everything. Turns out in many areas that's actually illegal.
Wow.
Which you wouldn't think about.
Like camping in your backyard?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways in which people might use these structures. So I think the most innocent, that one that we all think is like you should just have a right to do as a private property owner, is to camp in your own backyard.
Sure.
A lot of times people will have like friends or family up for the weekend. They might bring a motorhome, a couple days in the driveway. Again, that's something that's typically regulated under this ordinance. In East Bay, you can't really have any of these temporary dwellings unless it's for housing farm workers during the harvest season or at specifically approved recreational campsites, like we might think of Timber Ridge, something like that. But all other kinds of camping is not allowed on private property in East Bay Township right now. They've recognized that that is a problem.
And it's probably kind of hard to... I mean, like how that's just
it's hard to regulate. It's hard to enforce. And they talked about that when they were going through the zoning rewrite last year. They wanted to update this. It raised so many questions that they ended up just putting it on hold as a separate conversation so they could get the zoning code done.
Sure.
But now they're coming back to it and they're trying to work through some of these issues. I think what we often see with property right conversations is you'll often have some activities that you think are a no-brainer, letting the kids camp in the backyard, having an RV in the driveway. When you open zoning to those uses that are easy and make sense, oftentimes uses that you don't want or haven't thought about can creep in behind them.
Sure.
So in the case of camping, for example, during some of the public comment in the fall, people talked about, huge kind of parties with many, many tents on a vacant site on the river.
Interesting.
So someone might own a property, they let a bunch of campers, 20, 30 campers show up, have a big late night party.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, that's not as fun for the neighbors.
Right.
Or using property for commercial camping. So there are websites that are similar to Airbnb where property owners can let campers or RV people come and stay on their private land.
Sure.
And that becomes then a commercial activity, which you don't typically allow in residential properties. We regulate short-term rentals. So these are some of the issues that have come up that started with the basic, let's let people camp in their yard.
Right.
But then what do we do with all these other uses?
And it's not just camping in your yard. I mean, I know people who are building a house and then they're like maybe have a trailer on their property or something like that. And that seems like a no-brainer as well. But that's where the other things can creep in.
Yeah. And so in the story, I mean, I think it's interesting if you live in a different township in Grand Traverse County, we talk about what the ordinances are, not just in East Bay, but in the different townships. So a lot of them will allow camping for a short amount of time if you've had property damage, like a fire, or if you're building a new house and you need to stay in RV for, 6 months or whatever while you're doing the reconstruction. But there is still that issue of I think especially in areas like the Forest Lake area, places where in the summer, hotels are expensive. You might get a couple RVs starting to come up in the driveway, or you'll have an area where a lot of people are using RVs. That's another example where that tends to impact the septic systems, can impact the lakes because they're not built to handle that much septage coming through. So it's all these just interesting, uses. And I think just based on the feedback that we saw in the ticker story this week from residents, there are those people who are like, what do you mean I can't park or camp in my backyard? But then having to get into those other kinds of camping.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I find it really hard that you're going to have like a police officer show up and grab your kid's s'mores and be like, get back inside, Bobby.
Well, the thing I will mention about zoning is it is actually police enforcement is a good example because police enforcement, they have, when someone pulls you over, they have the ability to use discernment to decide whether they want to write you a ticket. That's the same thing for zoning. Zoning tends to be complaint driven. So it's very, the township even talked about this. They're not driving around looking for little kids' tents to write zoning tickets to. Right. But let's say the reason why they want to address this in the ordinance is it is technically still against the rules. So let's say you got into a dispute with your neighbor, you guys weren't getting along, they start calling and complaining about your kid's tent all the time. Yeah. Then you're getting into the rules. So they just want to make it clear and kind of clarify that.
I mean, neighbor complaints, does that ever happen?
That does happen from time to time.
Beth, I'm curious, was there an incident or something in particular that prompted them picking up this conversation again, or just on the agenda?
Yeah, I think, there were concerns about, having it be too restrictive, that they recognize there are all these situations where people might, realistically need to have a short-term tent or an RV or motorhome. But then once that conversation came up, all of these other kind of thorny issues came with it. So,
can of worms opened.
That's how zoning goes.
Zoning is that way. Absolutely. Well, we're going to kind of go to another story that's similar right now. And it's a story you wrote this week again about private businesses utilizing public space. It's public versus private conversations. And this is in particular about a tour operation. It's the Troy Daly, the owner of TC Ale Trail. They operate Paddle for Pints, Kayak, Bike, and Brews. If you have seen maybe that, like it's like a cycle bar, the TC Cycle Pub. It's one of those things that is down Front Street. That's one of those kinds of operations. But it's really the Paddle for Pints that we're talking about right now. And the city officials were looking to examine the fee structure for the agreement. So in this particular case, Mr. Daly has an agreement with the city. He has paid, since 2017 to utilize public space, public parks, because they were kind of the drop it off and pickup points for a lot of these guests. And then, the fees increased, and now it's, a conversation about should those fees increase? How much should the fees be? So what is the issue here? Yeah, I mean, so these operations, I'm sure people have probably seen them downtown in the summer. They, the tour guests usually have their little backpacks on, and they are launching on kayaks, typically from Hull Park, and kayaking down the Boardman, and then they're, getting out and stopping along the way, like going to a stop at Right Brain Brewery or Rare Brew Pub. The Kayak, Bike, and Brew, they use a combination of kayaking and biking along the Tart Trail. So it's a way, Troy was explaining it as a way to get visitors out into the waterways and the trails of Traverse City, and also, support local businesses. They're stopping at multiple establishments for a beer or a bite to eat. So Troy's contract, which you mentioned, started in 2017, went to 2021. The fees originally, he's essentially paying the city for its use of parkland. It's not exclusive use. People can still come and go from the boat launch or from Hull Park or whatever. But it just allows him to stage and use those for launching pads. So that started at $8,000 for the first 2 years. It was supposed to go up to like $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 by 2021. In 2020, Fish Pass was supposed to start construction at the Union Street Dam site. That construction was ultimately delayed due to a lawsuit. However, because it was, at the time it was thought it was going to go forward, the city renegotiated its contract with Troy because the kayakers were going to have to get out at American Legion Park instead of going down to the Union Street Dam site because of the construction. During that renegotiation, the city clerk, Benjamin Marantet, said he raised the issue that he could see from the popularity of the tours that he believed that Troy Daly was generating a significant amount of revenue using city parkland through his business. So when they renegotiated the contract terms, they increased those fees pretty significantly. So what was supposed to be $10,000 in 2020 went up to $40,000. Wow. So his new contract, which ended in 2024, the last couple of years, the payments every year have gone up $42,000, $44,000, $46,000, and $48,000 this past year, just over that. Wow. So, I think the conversation that I was having with both Benjamin and Troy was that what is the formula for how that is structured, how those fees are structured? Yeah, where did that number come from? Benjamin Marantet acknowledged that there's not a magic formula. It's not a set way of calculating it. The city is not supposed to make a profit off the fees that it's charged. It's supposed to charge based on what its anticipated impact is. It does have some flexibility in the math calculation of that. And so Benjamin was saying the fees that are being collected are going back into the general fund to support city park operations, again, reflecting the fact that there's an impact to these city parks from having a lot of tour traffic in. On the flip side, Troy Daly has said that the fees are escalating so much that it's making his business unsustainable, and that the amount of paddlers that he could be bringing through under his contract is over 8,000, but he's only averaging a little over 2,000. Oh, wow. And he's had to deal with a range of issues from COVID-19 and the economic downturn to multiple city road and bridge projects that have closed down different parts of the waterway, limiting his tour business. So right now, the city and Troy have not reached an agreement for the 2025 season. They're trying to work that out right now. Troy normally would have put his tour tickets on sale before Christmas.
So he's feeling several months behind in this. And it has just really raised a bigger issue, Christal, of how do city commissioners allow commercial operators who are making a for-profit business using city parkland?
Sure.
What is the appropriate way to charge them for that? And in the future, once Fish Pass is done, they're anticipating that might bring more attention to the river, more commercial traffic in the future. So they want to have a larger policy discussion about how do we negotiate this.
And even creating a formula, like what is that going to look like? And I would question too, utilizing park space for sort of like a launch and, drop in, drop out, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, are they really making money utilizing that parkland? They're more making money utilizing the rivers, which the city has no control over, right?
It's true. The city has no regulatory control over the river. So there is a scenario in which Troy could find private property owners to partner with, and he could potentially just avoid the city altogether. He wouldn't have to pay those fees, and the city would also then have no say over what happens on the river or with the tours. So there may be an incentive there for the city to not make it so prohibitive to work with the city so that it still has some say and influence over how the tours are conducted, rather than going around to private property. I think there's a bigger discussion that's going to be had there. One great example of a potential alternate formula is you just charge per head. So the tour operators track how many kayaks or participants are coming through each week. That way, if they have bad weather or cancel the tour, they can really reflect, like, the amount of fees they're paying to the city reflects how much business they're actually doing.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But, I'm just here. I'm not a commissioner. So
right. And in Troy's case, he's also paying, in addition to his fees to the city, he is paying for, temporary trash bins and trash collection. He's paying for restrooms. He's paying an annual donation to the TART trails for the use of the trail.
Wow.
He's paying for river cleanups. So he's paying a lot of fees above and beyond the fees to the city. And I think that's also part of his question is what are the fees to the city going towards?
Right. And it feels like he's being a good steward of this if he's doing those things in addition to paying the fees as well, of just like, hey, I'm trying to do my best here. And he's regulating. I would guess that when you have a tour operator that is trying to make sure that, people in the kayaks, they're not allowed to bring coolers, they're not maybe overindulging, that kind of thing. Versus you just have, other people on the river that are,
and I will say, Benjamin Marantet himself said that Troy has a meeting with city department heads at the beginning and end of each season. They've had no complaints, no police complaints, no incidents. So they do acknowledge that they feel he's running a good, tight business.
Yeah.
It's just really getting down to the fee structure. And also, I think the bigger question is, do we want all these commercial operators in city parks? Like, do we want people encouraging people to tour the river and to drink, which is what some of the tours are based around? Troy would say he does all those things that you mentioned, offers food, makes sure people are drinking responsibly. But it's a question that some commissioners feel like this isn't the kind of tourism that we want in city parkland. So that's part of the philosophical discussion.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, it's a very larger discussion, much larger discussion. I saw that it had a lot of comments on Facebook when you posted the story. What's your overall sense of what the public, this is a very random public who are...
Sure, it's a sampling ticker page. Yeah.
Sampling on the ticker page. But what do you get the sense of here?
I think there was a lot of... similar to the East Bay Township story, there was a lot of feedback about government overreach, feeling that maybe some of the fees were unfair or should be more clearly defined, that we shouldn't be making it so hard for businesses to be successful. But there were also people who, again, pointed out these are public parks. Like, they're not something that a commercial operator is guaranteed to be able to use to run their business. Right. They should be accessible for everyone. If there's a group of 20 kayaks going out, does that stop, or delay someone else from getting out on the water? So I think, it was a mix of feedback.
All right. Well, great job as always. Thank you so much. I know that we're going to be following up on that as you keep going. Anything to add on that, Ellie? It's kind of an interesting story.
It really is. I mean, at the risk of being a little too nosy, do you sense that there's an escalating tension there, or is it kind of a situation where everyone wants to make it work?
Yeah, it's interesting. There There are some tensions. I think there's just a strong disagreement right now. I think, the city clerk's office wants to see those fees be even higher. Troy already feels like they're unfair and too high and should be scaled back. So I think there is some philosophical dispute. I think what will help solve that is getting more city commission feedback and resident feedback. Like, is the public okay with these tours? Yeah. And that way, it won't just be one person, a city clerk's decision. It'll be a policy decision coming from the city commission about how they handle those tours.
Yeah. Well said. Well, coming up, Ellie Katz is going to give us some climate insight into the ice storm that toppled the north, and we're going to discuss the Great Lakes Sea Lamprey Control Program for the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. But first, a word for our lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. So one thing I've noticed as I keep getting older is that I'm not getting the restful sleep I once had in my youth. Remember when you could just sleep for days? Like when you were a teenager? Yeah. It's just kind of amazing. It's just oh my gosh, I just slept for 48 hours. It was amazing. And what I have noticed is that, it's a little harder for me to fall asleep. It might be tossing and turning a little bit more. And sleep patterns are going to change. Stress is going to do something to make it a little harder. And who's not stressed out, But one thing that you can do to help get yourself the most restful sleep possible is to get a better mattress at Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. Now, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings is your mattress destination. They have America's top 3 brands, Sealy, Tempur-Pedic, and the original Stearns & Foster. Now, you're sure to find the right mattress for you and your body. That's the big thing. And this is the other thing I have to say. I know there's a lot of people who are looking for mattresses online. I mean, how do you even test that out? You're going to lie down on your phone? It's not going to work. You got to go in person.
It doesn't work?
You got to lie down on the mattress. You got to check it out. A mattress that suits your body and your budget. You can find it all at Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings on Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. Rest, live, repeat. Love that. All right. So we're going to get back to currently here and our third story, Ellie. Let's spend a little time discussing this really major ice storm that pummeled the north. Gaylord, Charlevoix, Boyne City, Petoskey, inches of accumulated ice, causing trees and power lines to just topple. I mean, it looked beautiful, but my goodness. You had the governor that declared a state of emergency. And, we want to know whether this type of storm is related to climate change. Your story says it's a little too soon to tell. Why don't you tell us more about that story?
Yeah, so I spoke to Richard Rood. He is got a long academic title, Professor Emeritus for Climate and Space Sciences and Engineering at the University of Michigan. But he's been studying for years this data that goes back to 1979 on ice storms in the Great Lakes and freezing rain, which is kind of what led to this most recent storm. And from that data, this is a paper that is still in the review process, so it hasn't been published yet. But that analysis shows that the freezing line, which is kind of this line where historically Michigan was above, right? When you have these conditions, typically the precipitation that falls to the ground is going to end up as snow.
It's going to be snow.
It's going to be snow. Down in Texas, it's going to be rain. There was a portion of the country that did historically have more freezing rain. Sure. They kind of fell right along that edge. What they're seeing and what his theory is that freezing line is moving further and further north.
Oh.
And we're kind of in that transition zone now. So that could have contributed to this most recent ice storm. Like you said, it's a little too soon to tell. There hasn't really been much analysis on that. But it could be a factor. He said it kind of checked all the boxes for the things that he looks for in weather events that are maybe affected or impacted by climate change.
It was honestly unlike anything I'd ever seen. I mean, really. And I know that as more and more information is found and more stories are told about this recent ice storm, it is gearing up to be like a top 10 storm in Michigan.
Oh, absolutely.
I know as somebody who grew up here, lived here my whole life, you want to know, is this the new norm? Is this going to be something that I have to prepare for in the future?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
As with all things related to climate change. Dr. Rood thinks that the risk for these storms could be higher for a time.
Yeah.
So while we're in that transition zone, while that freezing line is moving further north, for the next 15 to 20 years-ish, we could be at a higher risk for more freezing rain that leads to ice storms, more severe weather of this kind. But as the climate continues to warm, we'll eventually be below that line.
Yeah.
And so, 30 years out, 40 years out, even beyond that, we could be just getting rain. Whereas in the next 15 to 20 years, we might be seeing freezing rain. Yeah. Whereas, historically we've seen snow.
And that just means, flip-flops all the time, right? Is that what we do when we get there?
I mean, I have to say, too, that my heart goes out to Gaylord because I feel like the last couple years, Gaylord, and I think this is maybe indicative of other patterns of more extreme weather that may eventually have their roots in climate change. But, Gaylord got pummeled with a tornado.
Yeah.
They had record snowfall this year, almost 186 inches of snow this year. And then this freezing rain event coming in right after. They've had to deal with a lot of extreme weather.
Totally.
Yeah.
That plays into it too. I spoke to a meteorologist who thinks there isn't as clear of a line between the data that we have and future ice storms. But he did agree with Richard Rood on the fact that we know climate change is going to lead to more precipitation. And how that precipitation ends up coming down remains to be seen. But there's going to be more snow. There's going to be more rain. The Bay did not freeze as much as we've historically seen. The Great Lakes are not getting as much ice cover. We're seeing way more lake effect snow. So it's just kind of this perfect storm.
Yeah, it certainly is. And what can we do, or what can communities do to mitigate this damage from these types of storm in the future? Any advice there?
Yeah, so Rood kind of talked about just being prepared for ice storm emergencies. We're prepared more or less for tornadoes, for blizzards. We're kind of used to that kind of thing. Ice storms, not so much. So just having that basic knowledge, being prepared to run emergency generators, having that fuel ready to go.
How about burying the power lines? That's something when I'm driving north, I'm just like, why? Because that's what causes the power outages, right?
Yeah, and the lines at the gas stations, all the photos you've been seeing on social media, like you mentioned, just having extra fuel.
Yeah.
No, he brought that up too, burying power lines. This was a historic closure for the Mackinac Bridge. This is the longest it's ever been closed. It broke the record by 10 hours. So, thinking beyond emergency preparedness to infrastructure change could totally be coming down the road.
Yeah, great story, Ellie. Thank you so much. We're going to talk again. This is another story that I know we've been following. And if you are a lover of the Great Lakes, like every Michigander is, about sea lampreys. And the Great Lakes Sea Lamprey Control Program, Ellie, is back on track after an initial scare this year. So if you can kind of give us a little education about what are sea lampreys, where do they come from? I know they're just this weird looking little eel-like creature, but where did they come from? Why are they invasive? And what, tell us more about what this means for the Great Lakes.
Yeah, so lampreys, it's kind of interesting. They come from the Atlantic Ocean. That's their native range. And in that range, they're actually threatened or endangered. I don't know exactly which, but
really?
Yeah.
Did not know.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy, ironic contrast, but they are parasitic. In the ocean, when they're latching onto a whale, it's not that big of a deal. Here, people think they swam up through the canals.
Okay.
And that's how they enter the Great Lakes. When they latch onto a lake trout or a salmon, what happens is they have this. You've seen photos, right?
They look like an alien.
Yeah,
coming out of a monster movie.
Creature from beyond. We have native lamprey in the Great Lakes. They're super tiny. Yeah. They're almost like the size of worms. Sea lamprey are much, much bigger than that.
Oh, they're huge.
Yeah. And so when they latch onto a lake trout or a salmon, they, either kind of literally suck the life out of them, or they leave a wound that causes an infection that leads to a fish's death. When lampreys first arrived in the, early mid 20th century, the commercial fishing crashed.
Wow.
And this solution that the Great Lakes Fishery Commission was created to come up with is lampricide, essentially a pesticide that gets put into select rivers every spring and kills the baby lamprey before they can swim into the lakes, essentially. And that got caught in the crosshairs of the Trump administration's hiring freezes.
Okay.
So the probationary workers got laid off. And the seasonal labor that they typically hire, there was a freeze on that. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which is binational Canadian-American commission, typically contracts these workers from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's why they were subject to the federal freezes and cuts.
So that was rescinded and things are back on, but there was a delay, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's still kind of unclear, right? Like they're already a month behind schedule. They usually get started in April. Some of these people might have already moved on to other jobs. They might not want to come back. We still aren't really sure.
Sure.
It's certainly better news than not running a lamprey program. We tested that out during COVID.
Yeah.
Millions more lamprey get into the Great Lakes. It's like hundreds of millions of dollars of lost fishing potential.
I didn't know we tested that out during COVID.
Yeah.
Not good.
No.
And we should mention too, I mentioned Fish Pass earlier, but we've talked on the show before, but Fish Pass at the Union Street Dam site, that whole program is meant to be experimental to find new research technologies of keeping sea lamprey out of the Boardman River and other waterways.
I love Fish Pass. I'm sorry. I think it's fantastic. I know I always say this, but it is like this weird video game where you're like, doot, doot, doot. Nope, not you.
With a very important high stake end.
Yes, true. Yes, very true. I shouldn't trivialize it. It's very good. Well, great story, and I'm glad that it's back. I'm glad that we're going to have lamprey control again. Anything to add, Beth?
No, I just, again, these are really important connected issues, and it's great that the funding is in place for that. And when Fish Pass comes online, we'll hopefully have even more resources for that.
Absolutely. Well, both of you, I mean, what a great show. Thank you so much for being with us, Ellie Katz. It was fantastic.
Yeah, really
Beth,
fun.
as always, it was great to have you. I like to ask a question of like what you guys are looking forward to this week. So this week starts today, which is Thursday, but it's also Friday if you're watching or listening right now. It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
It's like we're in the future. So what are you looking forward to in the coming days, Beth?
I got two things I want to plug on Sunday. I'm just very excited about both of them. The TC Philharmonic is going to be doing like a season preview party at the Cherryland Center over where their School of Music is. So that's going to be at 3:00, and they still have some tickets. They're going to be like drinks and food and music and kind of showing what the upcoming season's going to look like. And then right after that, the Boardman Review, who I think we're going to have Nick Loud from the Boardman Review on next week.
Yeah.
To talk about that publication. They are going to be launching their new issue at the Little Fleet at 4:00 on Sunday, free event. You can kind of see some of the different stories and contributors. Those launch parties are always really fun. So
great. How about you, Ellie?
This is embarrassing, but I have gotten really into pickleball lately.
Not embarrassing. It's fantastic.
You and everyone else in Traverse City.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just hopping on the bandwagon. But my boyfriend and I play in a league on Thursday nights. So I'm getting geared up. My competitive energy is starting to flow. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I'm headed to the UP for some reporting this weekend. So
very
looking
fun.
forward to that.
I love that. Well, I'm just looking forward to tonight celebrating my friend Gary. It's his birthday, and we're going to go to dinner. So,
fun.
Woohoo!
Nice.
That's
where are you going to go?
He's a good friend of the show.
He's a good friend of the show, and we're going to go to Modes because it is a Traverse City institution. So
sure is.
There you go. We will be back next Friday with a special guest, the editor of the Boardman Review, Nick Loud. I'm very excited about that new edition. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all platforms at christalfrost.com. You can follow us on social media. That's super easy to do. We are everywhere. You can watch the entire show on Facebook or YouTube. You can also get the podcast version anywhere you find your podcast, so really easy to do that there. Currently is a Compass Local podcast. It is produced by Pancake Boy Productions. We want to say a huge thank you to our lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, the place to go for mattresses, in addition to the wonderful West Shore Bank and the Coin Slot. Now, speaking of the Coin Slot, let's get the ball rolling. We end every episode by getting down and dirty with some pinball. Mm-hmm. And Ellie, do you pin?
I do not.
You do not?
I do now. Yeah.
You do now. All right. Let's do it, shall we?
Let's do it.
What is your favorite Northern Michigan haunt?
Mine is in Leland, and this time of year especially, I'm going to go to the Village Tea Shanty, get the pretzel bread. That's coming up in April. They're opening. And then I go hiking at Clay Cliffs, and that is my favorite 1-2 combo.
I love the sauna on East Bay. MI sauna or Mi sauna or my sauna. It's still, the owner says it's whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
And he is of Finnish descent, so I have to say sauna. But no, I love going in there. It's a fun way to be able to swim in the lake in the wintertime.
One of my favorite places on earth happens to be the Ace Hardware, and it's on East Bay Township. It's on Bunker Hill Road. I love this place. I walk in there, and everyone knows each other. One time I walked in there, they were doing like a chili competition.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, why? This is amazing.